Good morning, boys and girls. Today what we are going to be doing is looking at how we can make our Kara Walker inspired designs. So the first thing I'm actually going to do is I'm going to make sure I have my picture chosen. Now remember what I've said about the fact that I cannot have any details. So one of the things I got to take into account is if I have this picture, is it something that would be legible as what it's supposed to be without things like the words or the facial details like the eyes, that sort of thing. And the answer is, for the most part, yes, because the thing is that this was actually one of the most well-known photos taken right after Brown versus Board of Education with desegregating schools. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at how we can make all these little pieces. So the easiest thing I'm actually going to do is I'm going to start with doing stuff towards the back. Now, I can't do all these little tiny details up top, so I'm going to basically just keep everything sort of simplified when I do it. One thing I also want to make sure is that I have a neutral background color for my canvas. So remember, to get your background color, you have to do Alt and right click or double click in order to get that little pop-up menu. And I definitely want the middle tone of gray. So gray right here. This is the middle tone of everything between white and black. So I want that neutral gray tone as my background. Okay, so I'm gonna move it over. And I can eventually, when I'm done with this, stretch this out to the point that, it fits to all sides. But I'm not going to worry too much about things like the columns in the back. What I'm going to focus on are things like, this little part of the building right here. And for the most part, for simple parts like that, I'm going to be using the polyline tool because it's a lot of straight lines. So for example, I'm going to go right over here. I'm going to click. I'm gonna click again. Basically like this little section right here, I'm basically just making a triangle. And this, I'm gonna probably do as a light gray, or I could even do white. Because what's gonna end up happening is right here, these two people in the front, which I believe are Mrs. Brown and her daughter, they're the ones who were basically the quote unquote representation for this case. They will be completely in black. Now remember, the other thing is I don't want an outline or border color, so I want my border color to either be transparent or the same color that I picked. So I'm going to do transparent, just like that, and there's that first part. I could probably even make this a little bit longer to even go all the way over like that, so that way it kind of works along this part. So now is when I'm going to start doing things like the columns. And the columns, I'm going to keep actually pretty simple. So I'm not really going to go into too much detail with these. So I'm just going to kind of keep them very simple, very basic. And I can kind of go over the image of Mrs. Brown because eventually I'm just going to go over this part. So I'm not too concerned about if I accidentally go over her hair or anything like that. Some of these parts, because I'm not doing some of the details, I'm probably gonna do, some things that can sort of identify that these are columns, little angles, things like that. And like I said, I'm not worried too much about the fact that I'm going over, because I can easily move these off to the side, group them all together, and I'll show you about that in just a second. So here we go. Boom, boom. Just like that. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select all of these and I'm gonna group them together. So I'm gonna make sure I have one selected, I hit shift, I'm holding down on the shift button, and I'm selecting all these other shapes. And now I'm going to go to arrange, I'm going to group them together. And now actually for the moment I want to either move them off to the side, or I can hit arrange, order, send backward. And right now they're behind my picture, which is perfectly fine. The next thing I want to do is I actually want to do the step right here where they're sitting. So once again, I make sure I'm on the polyline tool. And I'm going to go down, over, just like this. And I'm just going to keep this very simple with a very basic one color shape. And I'm not doing gradients, by the way, with this. Everything Kara Walker did was solid color. Now, once again, I'm gonna send this backward so that way I can see exactly what I'm doing. Now is when I'm actually gonna be going into the figures. And you wanna do this piece by piece. You don't necessarily wanna do this like, try to do it all in one shot, because if you do that, you're gonna have an issue. So what I'm actually gonna do is I'm gonna switch over to the polyline, to the curve tool. I'm gonna zoom in, I'm gonna focus first on the little girl. I'm blanking on her name, which is horrible. But remember, I want, because this is gonna be the focal point, she's gonna be done entirely in solid black as well as her mother. So now I'm gonna start by doing my best to follow the outline of her body to the best of my ability. Now, if at certain points, you know, I kind of forget certain elements, like how I forgot that little part there, it's okay. Remember what I said though, you need to kind of try and do this in sections. So notice I'm not going all the way down. If I did that, I would be clicking and clicking and clicking away. I'm not too concerned about getting so close for facial details. But I am gonna do my best to try and make sure that it's recognizable that this is the basic shape. Now for something like this, I can now go back and add that little detail right there. And because this whole thing is black, that's why it doesn't matter if things are done in sections. So like if I do like this little part right here, this does not matter that I'm doing it in sections, because now, especially if I zoom out a bit and I'm just looking at, you know, the basic shape, and notice how this is all just black right here, okay? This is one of those times when, you know, if I were to take away the picture right now, you can kind of see where I'm going with this. So now is when I'm going to keep on adding some of those details. Remember, I'm zooming in so that way I can see up close where some of those details are. And depending on what it is that you've chosen, you may not have some of these details. You may not have a person in your picture. If you have something like 9/11, you know, you're not gonna have all these little details. You can basically just keep using something like the polyline tool the entire time, because you're just gonna have basically straight edges except for the part where the smoke happens. But as you can see, this is now where I'm at with just this one part. Now I'm gonna pause, I'm gonna go forward a little bit, because here's the thing, this is where this is gonna get a little bit tricky. Because what I need to do is I need to once again do this part in pieces, because this little section right here, the newspaper article, I'm gonna do that in complete white. Remember, I can't do any words. So what I'm gonna do really quickly is I'm gonna do the woman, and I'm gonna focus on the top, on most of her top part before I go into this. Because if I also look really closely, she's also holding the newspaper right here. So there's a part that's gonna kind of overlap from all of that. So as you can see right now, what I've done is I've done these two bigger parts of the top of Mrs. Brown's body. And I say two because I actually did two sections. So one thing I do want to make sure to do is group them together. So I click on one, I hit shift and I hold down shift, and I click on the other, I go to arrange, group, and now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move it off. Because I wanna focus on this part right now. Now, the thing is that this isn't just a straight like rectangle, although I am gonna switch back over to my polyline tool. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna zoom in on the newspaper, and I'm gonna do my best, like, cause some of these edges kind of blend in a little bit, but you know, I'm gonna do straight lines. Or mostly straight. Now because it's kind of behind her foot, I'm still kind of going with it. Now up. And once again, like I said before, this is going to be completely white right here. Now I'm going to actually move this part to the side, because now what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on her hand right there. So I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to switch back over to my polyline tool, and I'm actually going to seriously focus on this hand shape. Actually, I don't want my polyline tool. What I wanted was my curve tool. Sorry. So what I really want to focus on is this hand shape that is holding the newspaper. Once again, that's going to be solid black. And now what I also want to make sure I do is I do that foot right there. Eventually the rest of that can kind of become blended together, but the foot is also very important because it does block part of the newspaper. So now what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to bring this back. And remember, I can kind of use my arrow keys to help me. Now you can't really see like where the hand is. That's where this is going to come in. So just like that. And now I still got to do that last bottom part. So I'm going to zoom in. This is going to be very easy to do this part right here. Once again, I'm going to go to the curve tool. And right now, I am quite literally just outlining the rest of Mrs. Brown's shape. This time now I'm keeping it down a little bit lower so it doesn't accidentally go over the newspaper. And now what I can do is I can take the picture, I can move it off to the side, and there is the picture. Pretty much complete.